Ciao tutti! If you're confused by the new names showing up in your inbox or your podcast feed, let me explain. I'm Danielle O'Terry, and I created Feast Travel and the newsletter and podcast called Tante Belle Cose. Now, when you start a business, you have a plan for how you think it will go, but if you're being responsive to what your clients truly want and need, that plan is going to change. A lot. So after I left the museum world, I started a travel business working with my Italian family in Cilento. And then from there, my cousin Ariana and I began collaborating on custom itineraries for all regions of Italy because she had an amazing network of guides in every single region. Then COVID hit, and during the lockdowns, I was a guest on many episodes of a now popular Italy podcast. And it was there that I launched Trip Consultations, which was a direct request from a listener who said, I would love to be able to get on Zoom with you for an hour and have you help me strategize my trip. And I've done hundreds of those since. And I give people everything that they possibly could need, from hotels and guides and restaurants to tips that you can only really give if you have a deep personal experience of Italy. And then from there, people asked me for deeper cultural knowledge, all my geeky art history stuff acquired from 16 plus years working in a museum. And so I started writing this newsletter on Substack called Tante Belle Cose, and then it turned into a podcast finally last fall. It's a lot of work to do a podcast, folks. So at that point, I realized I got too many names, and it's confusing. So what's the heart of all of this? Family. My roots are 100% in Italy, and the years that I spent living and studying in Italy continued to give me life, and it's an investment that I continue to make. And so I may as well just use my own name. So I've integrated a lot of the feedback, which has led me to simplify everything. So Feast Travel, this podcast, now just falls under my name. I'm Danielle O'Terry. I'm an Italian-American art historian, writer, and travel advisor. And this is my podcast dedicated to sharing all the many beautiful things you can discover in Italy. To see the show notes or join our subscriber community, visit danielleoterry.com. When I told a few people that I was going to Turin, I was surprised that none of them had even heard the name. One person said that they knew about the Shroud of Turin, but then they wondered if it was actually in Turin. So it is, though it's rarely on display. But you can still go and pray in front of the area where it's stored, which I did. And also, I really want to do a future episode about the Shroud of Turin and the amazing story of the place where it was hidden during World War II because the Nazis really wanted it, and they were just a few feet away when the monks that were protecting it kept their cool. Another episode, though, I promise. Turin is one of Italy's major cities, and yet it doesn't appear anywhere on the map of mass tourism, which makes no sense. But good, I'm glad. It's only an hour from Milan, which means it's close to one of the biggest airports in Europe. It's affordable, and the food and wine is fantastic. The city is very walkable, and it truly offers the experience that so many people imagine and want in Florence or Rome. The walking, wandering, visiting art galleries, drinking coffee, cocktails, wine, enjoying everything at a leisurely pace of life that is just so Italian. But mass tourism makes that experience harder and harder to find. You can still sit in the piazza in Trastevere right across the street from a beautiful church, but the spritz is weak and expensive, and the waiters are overworked, and there's a line of other tourists hovering nearby waiting for their turn. First, it's a royal city. With a city plan created by the Royal House of Savoy, it's often called the Paris of Italy. And it does have a very French feel. In fact, it's close to the French border, and when you listen to the locals, if your Italian is good enough, you'll notice the accent has a distinctly French sound. But Turin is also an industrial city. It's elegant and royal, but also working class. This is where Fiat was headquartered for many years, with factories that attracted workers mainly from southern Italy. So Turin is this fascinating mix, a clean, well-organized northern Italian city, but populated by people from the south who are warm and friendly. If you read Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend, you may remember that the older Lennu, who we meet at the beginning of Book 1, and then again at the end of Book 4, lives in Turin, and that's where she's able to live her life as a writer. Turin is filled with historic cafes, which I love. There's even a historic cafes and Savoy Salons association, and it lists 10 of the most historic cafes that are still operating. The oldest is 262 years old, and the youngest, 118. If you're a solo traveler, or you're someone who doesn't want to book a lot of tours and wake up early to snag tickets for the Colosseum the minute they're released 30 days in advance and go through all of those hoops, go to Turin. It's one of the best places for a solo traveler because all of those cafes you can just sit and write and people watch and not feel weird for dining alone and also not spend a fortune. People know the Piemonte region, the name meaning at the foot of the mountains, Piemonte, because of Alba truffles, Barbera, Barbaresco, and of course, Barolo. The area has incredible food and wine. The local cuisine is amazing, and you can experience all of that right inside of Turin. I was there in March to get to know the city better and to scout out new places for my clients. If you want to go to Rome to see the big sights, definitely go. But if you want to experience Italian life, an Italian city, walking, wandering, great art, great cuisine without all of the pressure, and without participating in the machine of mass tourism, Turin is idyllic. It's one of those cities that Italians love too. Many southern Italians will sneer at Milan, saying that all they do is work and live in their horrible weather. Or similar for life in the Veneto, and they'll mention the factories and the pollution that tourists don't often see. But every Italian I know, when you mention Turin, they all say the same thing. Turin is beautiful. It's a royal city. Turin is marked by its royal history, and it's also a working-class town. It was the political center of the Risorgimento, the movement that led to the unification of Italy's kingdoms and duchies in 1861. And it's also the center of many major labor movements. Inside many of the old royal palaces are art galleries and museums. But living in Turin is very affordable. While I was there, I met up with some American friends who relocated to Turin about 10 years ago, and I fell over in my chair when they told me what they were paying in rent. I asked them if they missed the US, and they looked at each other and smiled, perhaps not wanting to offend, and laughed as they said, "No, we don't." Turin is the very best place in Italy for anyone with a sweet tooth. I've never seen so many chocolate shops, old ones and new. Turin is where gianduja was invented. It's a combination of chocolate and hazelnut paste, which was introduced to the rest of the world as Nutella. When the French occupied Italy at the turn of the 19th century, Napoleon banned British goods from entering any French-controlled ports. Chocolate, therefore, was in short supply, and then mixed with Langhe Valley hazelnuts to extend it and to create bliss. Now, I don't even have a big sweet tooth. I'm more of a salt and fat kind of a girl. But you cannot not want chocolate in the city, which makes it simultaneously an art form and also the local thing to do. I think every visit to Turin should start at Café al Biccherin, open since 1763. Biccherin, which means a little glass in the local dialect, is their signature drink, and it tells you much about Turin. It's a shot of espresso with a layer of hot chocolate in the middle and cold milk on top. It's served in a handleless glass, and even though they give you a spoon, they recommend that you not stir it. The thing to do is to swirl the glass so you can experience the hot, the cold, the sweet, the bitter. It's like several different experiences in one glass. And you should also order the hazelnut cake, drowned in chocolate, to accompany it. Café al Biccherin is a place that's right up my bookish alley. It's small, it has a single wax candle on each table in a silver holder, there are small round marble café tables, and it has a kind of moody, Frenchy atmosphere. It's been there since 1763. Alexander Dumas would drink coffee there, and other intellectuals used to gather. Make this your starting place in Turin and go from there. And also directly next to the cafe is a shop with excellent chocolates for sale. Turin has many galleries and museums, and you don't really need reservations for any of them, except perhaps the Egyptian Museum. It's the largest museum of Egyptian art outside of Egypt. And why Egyptian art in Italy? It started in the 1600s, when there was a mysterious Egyptian-style altar in Turin from Rome. And that sparked a fascination with Egypt among the local royals. So, fast forward to 1753, King Charles Emmanuel III sent an ambassador to Egypt to collect ancient treasures. He brought back hundreds of pieces, and that really forms the nucleus of the museum's collection. Then in 1824, King Charles acquired a massive collection from a French consul who had spent years gathering artifacts in Egypt. And that's when the museum officially opened its doors. The museum kept growing thanks to excavations in Egypt led by Italian archaeologists who became fascinated with Egypt by visiting Turin. And those were the days when whoever sponsored the dig could bring home a good chunk of the spoils. It doesn't work like that anymore, which is a good thing. I visited the Palazzo Madama, which is part of the complex of the Royal Palace. Now, I am a serious museum nerd, and I had never heard of it before. And its permanent collection is so impressive. I only went in because they had a special exhibition of posters from the mid-century, which looked really beautiful, and it was. But the medieval and Renaissance art that was on display was as serious and interesting as anything you'll find in Florence. I gasped when I saw a painting by one of my Renaissance favorites, Antonello da Messina. I've tracked down every painting by him from New York to Palermo to London, but I had no idea he was also hanging out in Turin. So yes, start your day at Café Turin, wander toward the Royal Palace, poke into the Palazzo Madama, then head toward Café Mulisano for a vermouth and a few tramezzino sandwiches which were invented there, continue on shopping, gallery hopping, or take a nap and get ready for a delicious meal at Tre Galline, where you should have the bollito misto, and also leave room for the cheese course. And then the next day, visit the Porta Palazzo Market, the largest outdoor market in all of Europe. To talk more about food in Turin and the market, I chatted with my friend Marco Romeo, who owns Streety Food Tours. I took a Streety tour of Palermo in 2019, and then Marco came to New York 2 years ago and joined an Arthur Avenue food tour, which I led. Since then, we've stayed in touch, and when I learned that Streety was expanding to Turin while I was in Turin, I was very eager to chat.
We try to differentiate our offer by offering strictly authentic experiences. Everybody says authentic experiences, but let's say we are very fundamentalists when it comes to the selection of food. So on our tours, we only offer what's specific from the town or from the region. So running a tour in Rome for us means only offering specialties from Rome, drinks from Rome, no cannoli, no spritz, no random pizzas or burratas or other stuff. And we always feature in our tours some old school dishes that are not popular among the tourists, but they are popular among real local foodies. So in every tour, we have some challenging food, which could be in Rome, the tripe, in Florence, the stomach panini, with panino al lampredotto. In Venice is the Venetian liver with onion. In Palermo, the spleen sandwich. In Catania, the pig blood sausage, sanguinaccio. In Turin, we have the tongue in salsa verde. And also in our Bologna evening tour, we have some tongue. And we don't do this to challenge travelers. We don't do this for the show. We do this because that is real authentic local food. Okay. And so we always one of our standard messages is that we don't care what tourists like. We don't want to meet tourist expectations. We don't care if we provide food and tourists say, I don't like it. It's fine. We cannot like everything, but this is a food experience. So I might join a food experience. Maybe I don't like any of those, but that's how the local food is. So there's nothing we can build up for the show. So it's either this or fake food for tourists. So we prefer to do this. And our guests appreciate this. So if you read some reviews, you often find some comment that says, well, I didn't like everything, but I got to know the real local food. All guides are local, so we're like surfers. In the surfing community have this localism, no? My waves, my beach, small groups, to keep the quality of the experience. So there is a proper interaction with the tour guide, with the vendors, which are a pillar of our tours, and probably also a laid back attitude with the guests. So we don't top stories with boring dates and names. It's more if it's there a monument on the way, what does this monument represent to locals? It's not really the story of the bricks of the monument. And the same when we go into the markets, how locals shop, how do they talk, how do they use their gesture to communicate. I love Turin personally, and it's one, as you said, is one of the few big cities in Italy where you can still enjoy proper Italian mood, walk around without mass tourism, feel those vibes of a proper day that hasn't been spoiled by crowds and noise. Even in Sicily, like until a few years ago, it was still kind of authentic. But now all vendors from the streets to the restaurants, they have this approach of sell, 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 sell what the tourists want. In Turin, no, you still have those authentic. Well, you also have it in other cities, but in Turin, you don't see all these big herds of tourists walking around. So the mood hasn't been spoiled yet. And the city has got so much to offer in terms of history, art, culture, and food. And we know this is not a good market in terms of food tours because this is what the web agency work with us says. Like there are not many researchers when it comes to food tours, but it's part of our mission. Like we want to, in a way, educate travelers visiting Italy, and we want to direct them to real Italy. So maybe it's not popular now, but maybe we will convince 100 people a year to stop in Turin for once while they visit the Langhe and the wine region. And this is already a success for us. Even if they don't do the tour, maybe they just bump into our blog, they read it, they're invited to, they feel inspired to visit Turin. So we just want people to know that Italy isn't just Venice, Florence, Rome, or the sunset of Sicily and the Costiera Amalfitana. There is much more, and it's surprising and frustrating for me to realize that the large majority of travelers from all nationalities, they never heard about Turin at all. Like they heard maybe of Piedmont as a brand is it's mainly because of wine and truffle, but I never heard of Turin. Like when I say never heard, like the word Turin never passed through the ears. It's really new. It's very surprising, but you know how tourism is. Sometimes the destinations are unknown today, and like in 2 days' time, they're like the trendiest destination. Now, if maybe a couple of events, a couple of big influencers do something in Turin, and it's just everybody wants to go to Turin. So, in terms of proper business, we also realized that there isn't much competition in Turin. So we also thought let's just seed there and see what happens in the future. If it works, we're happy. If not, we're still happy because somebody visited Turin with us.
There are markets throughout Italy, but many of them, like the Campo di Fiori market in Rome or the Mercato Centrale in Florence, those have changed drastically. There are always a few stands selling vegetables or other freshly made things to locals, but the majority of the stands now sell things like limoncello or shrink wrapped cheese and sausage ready for your suitcase, but not the Porta Palazzo market.
All the area is amazing. I mean, you have the open air market, you have the indoor market, which is the biggest indoor market in Europe. I didn't know that. I just found out this year. And nearby you also have the vintage market. So it's really like a one district of vibes of any kind, from precious vintage items to precious little bakery in the market and fresh fruit. And it's very dynamic. And it's interesting because when you say food markets, normally the stereotype is thinking of south of Italy. Open air, sun, people shouting, that's the stuff. But I have to say, nowadays, even those marketings out of Italy have been spoiled by mass tourism. So you don't feel those vibes anymore that you still feel in Porta Palazzo. When you go to Porta Palazzo, you take a breath, like it's relaxing. You see the locals shopping, you don't see this stress of fishing, pedestrians, tourists. No, it's really a matter of the vibe spread by the vendors, by the locals themselves. You feel like they are there to sell their produce, their vegetables, their fruit, and it may take them the whole day. And it's fine for them because this is how it works locally. But when your customers become tourists, then you know that the peak of the tourist visit is maybe between 10 and 1 p.m. So you want to sell it all in those 3 hours. So you feel the difference in approach in terms of selling in the market that is becoming tourist, in a market that is still mainly for locals. And Turin gives these vibes. For instance, you don't see these standard spritz corners with photographs and English menus. Couple, yes, of course, because also tourists go, but you still feel that it's for everybody.
I'd also add that the authenticity of the Porta Palazzo market is the mix of food that's available. There was a butcher counter which didn't look very different from the others, but all of the butchers and the customers were African and the meat was halal. And then there are quite a few Peruvian stalls with everything from packaged products from Peru to fresh ceviche. This dynamism and integration of the new flavors with existing traditions is really the essence of Italian cooking. I had also a pane arabo, which was a typical piadina, but with distinct spices and onions inside that gave it a little Arabic twist. Now remember, tomatoes came to Italy in the 1600s via the Spanish, who controlled southern Italy as well as their colonies in Mexico. And tomatoes were merely ornamental for years until they were incorporated into the local cooking. And of course, now they're a signature of Italian cuisine. But of course, when you're visiting Turin, you do need to try the local food because Piemontese food is interesting and delicious.
One of the bites that we offer on our street Turin tours is this panino with the salsiccia di bra, uh, which is a beef sausage eaten raw and served in a sandwich. So it's like a, how do you call the raw meat? There's a specific French term. What's the term?
Oh,
Uh, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
yes,
Like the sushi of meat.
tartar.
Tartar, bravissimo, tartar. So it's basically like a tartar rougher, like because it hasn't been treated. It's just the sausage, fresh, and of course kept in a humid spot, but still served fresh. And there, with the softness of the bread, it melts in your mouth. It's a proper treat, and it's one of those specialties that maybe if a place becomes touristy, it might be a risk. Maybe because, and this is a thing, it's definitely one of the highlights for us, this being a specialized street food. But of course, Turin is much more than this. Turin is it's renowned in Italy for being the Paris of Italy. I don't know if you ever heard this expression. And it's been the very first capital of Italy and still keeps that elegant vest. And the palaces, the large avenues, and everything do give this idea of being the Paris of Italy. But it's interesting because it's one of the few cities that still maintain that elegance, but that roughness. So on our walking tour, for instance, the local tour guide tells a little bit of both. Or let's say high underlines these contrasts of Turin. It's the place where you expect just elegant people and palaces and dresses and history and fashion, and it has it. But then around the corner, you might enter an old, historic, dark bar where people have with their Barbera wine, stand on the bar, and just gives the best of the Italian street spirit while having some raw sausage, veal tongue. For chocolate lovers, it's quite a destination. So the gianduiotto is typical from the area of Turin, and it's served together with a chocolate drink called the bicerin, which is like the Italian Irish coffee without liquor inside. And this is the way we start our tour, to give some sugar in the blood and convince people to walk and see around. In the offer, where grissini is also a specialty from there. So we take this, the crunchy long grissini that became quite legendary in Italian restaurants in the 80s and the 90s. And I have to say that now you rarely find grissini on the table as it used to be in the past. Yeah, you don't find it anymore, basically. Very rare. Like in some maybe uh, old school pizzeria that's never been renovated, still run from the same family. They don't want to innovate. You still find grissini. But in Turin, you can try the original grissini made homemade in small scale by the bakeries. For this, we enter a family-run bakery, but the lady takes 2-3 types of grissini to make it try. Of course, it goes with a glass of Barbera wine. We have agnolotti. So this kind of a tortellini from Piedmont. And we offer this in a small pasta shop, pastificio, no? That makes it fresh every single day, wraps it with roasted beef. That's a traditional one with this beef gravy sauce. Okay, in this case, we can call it gravy. It's not a sauce. In America, no, there is this dispute between the gravy and the sauce. So the gravy comes from the long cooking of some meat, mainly. It takes all the fat and makes this thick gravy. We try to talk to travelers, curious people. If you want to do our tour just to fill up your Instagram profile, don't join our tour, because we don't offer those fancy, colorful stuff for Instagram. Most of street food is fried, is fat, is hyper carbohydrated food. So always the same colors, basically black and yellow. But this is what Italians eat. They want to experience the day. They want to meet the locals. They want to meet the guides. They want, rather than knowing like how old is a building, they want to make friends, learn. We're not a restaurant, so we don't have a menu. We say you get what we give you, and like it or not. If you don't like it, there are many other competitors just running a pizza, gelato, and spritz tour, which is totally fine. It's just a different target. There are some people who come to Italy maybe for the first time, and they've been dreaming for ages of having a pizza in Italy, spritz in Italy, gelato in Italy. So they would rather choose a tour that feature these specialties. Okay. And so very often I would say, adding to this topic, is that probably our guests have been to Italy before. So they choose treaty maybe not on their first trip, because maybe our tours are too much in the back streets. But on their first trip, they want to see the main attractions and the main dishes they want to try. On their second trip, when they want to go deeper into Italian culture and cuisine, then street is the choice. See?
There is so much more to say about Turin, and so I consider this the first episode of what will probably be many, because I'm really in love with the city and the Langhe Valley as well. And I love sharing the things that fascinate me, so I'm also working on a Turin itinerary for independent travelers, and I think that I'm probably going to make that available to our paid subscribers. Now, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, would you please leave me a review? This is how listeners find me. The more reviews, the more those apps will suggest this podcast to other people who want to learn more about Italy. It's a little thing that has a huge impact on a small business like mine, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening.